There's a final scene in the movie Castaway starring Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is playing the castaway. He has survived several years on a deserted island. And in the last scene, his character named Chuck Nolan has a package in his hand, and it's addressed to the Peterson Ranch. He's in West Texas, and he's delivering the package. That package has come ashore with his own body when he was cast onto this island. And he saw this package as one of his survival tools. That is, if he survived, then he would be able to deliver the Petersons' package. He finds their ranch. No one's home. He delivers it to the front door, and he drives out then to a deserted space in West Texas where there is a crossroad. And he is literally standing in the middle of the crossroad, looking north, south, east, and west, trying to decide the direction of his life. Bettina Peterson then drives up. Chuck Nolan doesn't know this is Bettina Peterson. She asks, "It looks like you're lost." "I do," he asked. "Where are you heading?" she says to Tom Hanks or Chuck Nolan. "I was just about to figure that out," Chuck says back. She says, "Well, cowboy, if you take this street to the north, there's nothing between here and Canada. If you take the west, it'll go through Amarillo all the way to California, south all the way to the Mexican border, and east out towards Louisiana." "Got it," he says to Bettina. "Good luck, cowboy," she says back to Chuck Nolan. "Okay," he says finally. And you and I are left in the movie not knowing which direction Chuck Nolan went in his life. You and I have been at that crossroad. We have been in a place where we had an hour of decision, where we had what we might call a moment of truth. For Christians, we'd have to say that flavored in any of our moments of truth or our hour of decision is the remembrance that once upon a time you and I were baptized in the water of grace, marked with the words of the Trinity. And in our baptism, we declare, "You're marked as Christ's own forever." What's the mark? The mark is quite literally a cross on our forehead. You and I are intended then to see in all of our crossroads, our hours of decision, our decision points, that we are to live a cross-shaped life. We're to appeal then to what the cross would mean in a decision of any type. We sang about that earlier. The second verse of our opening hymn reads this way: "So daily dying to the way of self, so daily living to your way of love, we walk the road, Lord Jesus, that you trod, knowing ourselves baptized into your death." We're marked as Christ's own forever to live a cross-shaped life. Jesus had his own moment of truth, his own hour of decision, we might say, in the gospel text assigned for this fifth Sunday in Lent. "The hour has come," Jesus says, "for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Whoever serves me must follow me. When I am lifted up, I will draw all people to myself." Jesus is speaking, of course, of the cross he is to bear for the sake of the world. We're used to talking about crosses in our world, in our culture. But I have to say, usually the talk is somewhat frivolous. Tennis players will say things like, well, my cross to bear is Serena Williams. Or my cross to bear is Pete Sampras. SEC football coaches will say, well, my cross to bear is Nick Saban and the Alabama Tide. Many spouses and partners talk about their mates' avocations as their crosses to bear. Golf, tennis, fishing, dancing, cooking, cycling. The list goes on, doesn't it? But the Gospels proclaim about cross-bearing. But I'm afraid very often we just resort to merely cross-wearing. Madonna. I don't know her last name. She was being interviewed recently. The interviewer noticed that she had a diamond-studded cross hanging around her neck. She said to the interviewer, yes, I may not wear much else, but I always wear my cross. A number of years ago, there was a young man who went into Chiswick's Jewelers in London looking for a nice cross for his girlfriend. The person attending the counter was then showing him a variety of crosses that were there, beautiful, beautiful crosses. She finally said to the young man, would you like a plain one, or do you want one with the little man on it? The Gospels don't talk just about cross-wearing. They talk about bearing crosses. You and I are invited to pick up ours and to walk the way trod by Jesus. We don't carry his cross. He can only carry that cross. But we're to pick up ours and follow him. The invitation to pick up our crosses and follow him is not sadistic, and it certainly is not frivolous. It's a life-giving invitation. But it does mean bearing some crosses. What are those? Well, all of us have had some. A 6-year-old being terrorized by the neighborhood bully is a cross. A 12-year-old who discovers that he can't read like the rest of the class and feels like he's the class dummy, but then finds out that he's got a condition called dyslexia is a cross. A 17-year-old who wanders around an American high school during lunchtime with no friends is a cross. A 22-year-old who finishes undergraduate school but then has no idea what she is to do with her life is a cross. Your cross might be, during a pandemic, the loss of a job or a business. It might be so isolated and lonely that you feel crushed. It could be a vastly diminished 401k, or a boring marriage, or a difficult addiction, or a pathological report. Jesus said to take up our cross and to follow him. Follow him where? To crucifixion? No, that's predisposed by Good Friday. We pick up our crosses and carry them through crucifixion into resurrection. But where do we find the guidance to carry our crosses? To whom do we turn when we pick them up and begin to bear them? Well, we follow the model of Jesus. He has several ways that he can help us pick up our crosses, follow in the way. Let me name a few of them this morning. I don't have a lot of time left. First is Jesus bore his cross by entering into prayer. Time and time and time again, when he had a difficult enterprise, you and I hear that he went off into the hills and had quiet time where he would pray and ask for guidance on what to do about this. You'll remember the last night before he literally picked up his cross, he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, sweating great drops of blood, we're told. Secondly, Jesus bore his cross by setting his face towards Jerusalem. You'll remember in Luke's Gospel, chapter 19, Jesus has just had a couple of wonderful days with Zacchaeus, that little man in the sycamore tree, and he's healed Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus has become a transformed person by being in the presence of Jesus. We then learn that in Luke's Gospel, Jesus then turns the corner out of the old city of Jericho and turns his face towards Jerusalem. That is, Jesus turned his face to face his cross. You and I are bid to do the same thing. But our society is so full of denial and avoidance, isn't it? We're so encouraged to not face our crosses, to pretend like they don't exist, to cover them up with all kinds of things and possessions, to not face the crosses that are in front of us. Jesus teaches us, no, the way to deal with our crosses is to face them, to turn our face towards Jerusalem, where Jesus not only absorbed all of that difficulty for us, but then was resurrected in victory. A third way that Jesus bore his cross was to give himself totally over to the welfare of others. Jesus' journey constantly was to offer himself and his love for the sake and the goodwill of the neighbor. Isn't it true that you and I can bear our crosses much better when we think about our neighbor, when we offer ourselves over to the other, when we are other-centered, when we care about the needs and the expectations and the desires of those around us, and yea, even those who are strangers. All the way to Calvary, Jesus was still considering the sake of neighbors, even the thieves who hang next to him. Fourthly, Jesus received help in bearing his cross. You'll remember on his way to Calvary, he fell. And Simon of Cyrene from North Africa was bid by those around Jesus to then pick up his cross and carry it a ways. Notice that Jesus didn't growl at him like some Arnold Schwarzenegger figure. I can do it myself. I don't need any help. I don't need you. I don't need the church. I don't need anybody. Leave me alone. Doesn't that sound so much like our culture? Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Jesus fell, and we assume that he appreciated the help that Simon of Cyrene, a black man from North Africa, bid to carry Jesus' cross a ways. God help us to ask for help. Jesus bore his cross, and in so doing, bore the burdens of others. He would have been reminded of Psalm 146 when the psalmist writes, "The Lord sets the prisoner free. The Lord opens the eyes of the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are bowed down. The Lord loves the righteous. The Lord watches over the stranger. He upholds the orphan, and he cares for the widow." And last, Jesus bore his cross in the victory of the resurrection. That death was not the last word. It was the second to the last word. The last word was resurrection. You and I are bid then to bear our crosses so that we will be Easter people, living in the hope and the victory of the resurrection. All of this the way Jesus bears his cross, is to help us then bear ours. And in so doing, you and I then determine and find out what's really important, the essential aspects of living a cross-shaped life. Dr. Thomas Oden was one of my professors in my doctoral program. He was a remarkable theologian. When he was a young missionary, Methodist missionary in China, seems that some of his writing and some of his speaking was disturbing the Chinese government. They put Dr. Thomas Oden, his young wife, his 2 young children under house arrest. They were there for a while. As he said to us as he recounted the story, we had many crosses to bear during those days of house arrest. One day, one of the Chinese officials came and said, "We're going to allow you to return to the United States, but you can only take 200 pounds of possessions with you. So take a few days. This is the date where we'll pick you up to take you for your transport back to the U.S. Remember, 200 pounds, they said." Thomas Oden, his wife, his children began to go through all of their things. They had accumulated books and antiques and artwork and all kinds of wonderful Asian artifacts. They began to filter through all these things. They began to weigh them, take this out, add this thing. Finally, the last day, they got all of their possessions down to 199 pounds. Soldiers came to pick them up. "Ready to go?" "Yes, we are." "Did you weigh everything?" they said to Dr. Oden. "Yes, we did. It's 199 pounds. Sort of a pregnant pause. Then that official looked at Dr. Oden and said, "Have you weighed the kids?" Thomas Oden, at recounting the story, said, "In an instant, in a moment of truth, we knew exactly what was essential. Artwork and books and artifacts became very secondary." They weighed their children, of course. All they had was what was on their backs, leaving China. What do you and I do with our moment of truth when we have to make an important decision, possibly a life-altering decision? We're there with Chuck Nolan in the middle of the crossroad. We're there with Jesus where he says, "The hour has come for me to make a decision about how I'm going to exercise my life." Jesus seems to be saying in that hour of truth, I'm going to give myself over for the sake of the world. And I call upon all people who want to live a life of love and mercy and grace to follow in the way. And in following in that way, you and I are called upon to pick up our crosses and follow him. Follow him where? To crucifixion? That's already been done for us. We pick up our crosses and follow him through crucifixion to resurrection. Amen.